if I wanted a brand new saw, I would have got a brand new saw. I want to see what you're made of here.
Putting me through the paces today, that's for sure. All right, now what we want to do, we are ready to roll, sorry, maybe, okay.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of People, Places, Powertools with Ethan, Alex Snodgrass today. The place is my shop, and the power tool, this beast of a bandsaw right here. So Alex is basically the man when it comes to bandsaws. You'd say that, right?
Well, I've had a year or two of experience,
Year or
that's for sure.
two? Yeah. So what's the first step?
Well, first we want to completely disassemble it. We're going to take the tires off, replace those. We're going to take those guides off, and then we're going to put a new Carter blade on there, as well as those Carter guides and tires. And we are going to make this thing sing and dance.
Yeah, and at the end of that, we're going to put
this
sticker on it.
on there because it'll deserve that Bandsaw Life Snodgrass method at that point.
And it's going to be approved. I can't wait to show you how it's done. Let's get into it. All right. We got the bandsaw. It's in not that great a shape. It's all right, but it definitely needs some work. So what would be the first thing that you would do to get this back in shape?
Well, first, like any other saw, let's get the table off, and then we'll get those tires off. But by getting the table off, we can get a good look at those lower guides. Okay. It'll make it a lot easier to install and adjust with the table out.
Perfect. Let's get it off.
We need to get these lower guides off. If you want to
clean it a little bit, no problem. I'll go get a vacuum.
All right.
All right, so it's a shop tool, so it can't be too clean, or else no one will believe that it does any work. So I left a little sawdust on it that you're gonna have to work around.
I appreciate that. Now, all we're gonna do with this model, and I gotta tell you, Jet, they have been building them right for a long time. With this model, and the bottom guides will come off, and then the top is just one bolt. Now this upper guide, it's even easier, believe it or not, because all we have to do is, and just like that, the upper guide is completely off.
There we go.
Now I believe we are ready to put some new fancy Carter guides back on this thing.
All right, let's take a look. Taking down to factory settings.
All right, now these are the new beauties that we're gonna put on this saw. These are new Carter guides for this, and those are 30,000 RPM double sealed bearings. They just don't get any nicer than that.
Sounds fast.
Now, in order to put the upper on, I'm going to remove this guard because I want y'all to be able to see everything that I'm doing.
All right. Thank you.
Now, in order to install these, it just doesn't get much easier. Put this right up to that. Put that bolt right through. Washer on the back side with our nut. Then, on the bottom, and we'll just screw those back into place.
So you get it in place, you get everything set up, but you don't tighten anything till the end because you want to wait for everything to come together, feel it out, and then you tighten everything up, correct?
Absolutely. We need to know where that blade is going to track, so there's no sense in tightening everything up and then putting the blade on and finding out we need to shift it a little bit. So that's why I'm going to leave everything loose until we get those tires installed.
All right, let's put the tires on. All right, so putting tires on, what's the best way to do it?
I'll tell you, urethane tires, there's a lot of ways that people tell you to do it. They tell you to heat them up. They tell you to put them in the dryer, make them soft. I have found the easiest way to do this is with a spring clamp. Now, a spring clamp is as basic as it gets, and it will make this job very easy to do. And the only thing we've got to do with urethane tires is just simply stretch it over the wheel. We'll put on a clamp, and then we're going to stretch it as far as we can in place, and we'll add another clamp.
Okay, so you're just locking them in place.
Exactly. Now, you're going to work your way around, and as you can see, I'm not going to get very far. Urethane doesn't stretch real well, so we're gonna do this kind of like eating an elephant, one bite at a time.
It's like eating an elephant and fighting an elephant as well. All right. So it's all locked in, and that's a one-person job. I was just here for moral support.
Don't forget that urethane tires tend to spread over time, so there's going to be a little gap, and that's so that if it gets warm, it doesn't spread and then hump up on the wheel, cutting the tire.
Okay.
So don't be afraid of just having a little bit of a gap. I tend to try to push it all in one direction. Voila.
Ready to cut?
Not yet. We got one more wheel to go.
All right.
So let's get this thing on the bottom.
So now we're gonna put the second wheel on the exact same way we did the first one.
Exactly. I'll tell you what, something that may make it a little bit easier. You have a simple little pry bar.
I do.
Let me have a pry bar and we'll just slide that back on.
All right. Being your assistant has always been a dream of mine, so I appreciate you letting me live this out.
Ethan, you are a funny man.
All right, so a bandsaw blade's a lot different than, say, a table saw blade, because a table saw blade's nice and compact. This, it's going everywhere.
Absolutely, and you never want to open up a blade if it's more than 3 strands in your shop. You really want to take that outside into the grass, somewhere soft, where you can kind of give it a little toss and it'll land in soft area, because if you bend one tooth, you've basically destroyed the blade. So, if you've got a 3 strand, that's pretty easy to open. We just simply let it separate between our hands. You've got 3 strands. Grab the right two or the left two, it doesn't matter which. There's always going to be a split on the opposite side. Grab that split, let go with the other hand, slowly let it open, gives you that controlled opening. Now when you fold it, an easy way to do that is to put the back edge on the floor so that you're not stepping on those teeth. Put it in the arch of your foot, hand palm up, twist it to you once, twice, push straight down. Perfect fold every time.
Okay.
Now when you've done that a whole bunch, well then you can take about 1/3 of the blade and you'll find that just simply flicking it is a lot easier, but that takes a little more practice.
That takes a couple years of practice? All right.
All right, let's throw this blade on. The way I like to do it is I like to kind of catch that bottom wheel first. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of pull up and stretch so that you can get it through your guards.
Okay, so start from the bottom and work your way up.
And then just simply roll that right onto the wheel. Now once you've got it in place to where it's not going to pop back off, give it just a few turns of tension. Just a little snug. Don't over tighten it. Give that a little bit of a turn, and then what that does is it kind of settles that blade into the track that it's going to ride. And then go ahead and give it a little bit more tension. Now, I always like to check tension on the left-hand side, never the right-hand side. Reason being, on the right-hand side you have guard, guide, table, insert generally in the way, and you've got resistance on this side. Always open up your door, lay your finger right here on top of this guard. That way you have a consistent distance from the wheel every time, and when you push, you shouldn't be able to get much more than about 1/4 of an inch. We're still way too loose, so we're going to crank this thing on up. Now, after you've turned it a few times, give it a rotation.
Okay.
And the reason that we want to do that is, remember, we've got a flexible blade, a spring, a tire, so you want to kind of get it settled back into place and then check it again.
Okay.
We're getting better. We still need a little more. You can feel that just to kind of see what I'm talking about there.
Okay, okay.
So let's give that a bit more.
So when you're adjusting it, do you want to go by the markings that are on the saw, or do you want to go by feel of it?
You're better off going by feel. Don't ever trust the gauges on the saw. And the reason I say that, generally when they weld a blade, they tooth match so that basically the blade ends up a little short or a little long. let's say they're off by 1/8 of an inch, and that's being extremely generous. That means that gauge is going to be off by 1/4 of an inch because there are two sides to the blade, and those gauges work off of a perfect blade length, not off of actual tension.
Okay.
So that's why we never really want to trust them. Use them as kind of a guide, but always kind of use your finger as that final. Now, I kind of feel like that's just about there. We'll give that one more rotation, and that feels pretty good. You can feel that.
That does feel good. So why are you adjusting the tension before you set the blade in place?
Well, because if you change the tension, it can change where that blade rides on the wheel, and we want to get it to where it's not going to change. So if we get the tension right, then we can kind of get that tracking where it's supposed to be.
Okay.
So I'm going to swap places with you, and we're going to track this blade so that the deepest part of the gullet is right in the center of the wheel.
All right.
Now, we've got our blade tensioned, everything is set, and I've also noticed that we're already absolutely perfectly lined up with the back thrust bearing.
So say it wasn't perfect here. How would you adjust that?
Well, then you would have to start adjusting the cam on the back side of these guides. By loosening the Allen wrench, you can adjust the cam of it so that it will slide right or left. In this case, we got it perfect the first time. Now on the bottom, even though it's lined up, I want you to notice I'm going to adjust the piece so that it's square to the body of the blade. Because if we're not square, what'll happen is it'll kind of angle that blade, and we want those side guides to be in line.
So you don't ever want the blade touching these guides.
Let's put it this way. If the blade is running and it's rubbing against the body of the guides, it will create friction and heat, which will take the set right out of the teeth, whether you're between those guides or not. Because steel, once it's been yielded, fancy word for being bent, every tooth has been bent, and you put friction or heat anywhere in the body of the blade, it will take the set right out of those teeth. And then once it's straight, it's going to seek the easiest route through the wood.
Every time you change a blade, you change these, correct?
Technically, you should not have to change the side guides. The only thing you should have to change is the thrust bearing.
Okay.
And that's with the Snodgrass method. The reason being is if you always put the deepest part of the gullet in the center of the wheel, doesn't matter what size blade you put up there, those side guides will line up perfect every time.
That makes sense.
Next, we want to adjust our thrust bearings.
Okay.
Now the thrust bearing, you want it as close to the back edge of the blade as you can possibly get without it actually touching until you begin to cut. You can see it doesn't turn when I rotate that blade. If it's rotating, it's pushing on the back edge of the blade, causing that front to tweak one way or the other. And so that's why we want it as close as possible without it actually touching. Top and bottom to make sure we've got that covered. Now that's good and tight. That's good and tight. Now, if I've done this the proper way, I should be able to touch right here in the center with as little as a fingernail. Both those bearings should turn, which they do. When I rotate the wheel, neither of them turn. So now we've got our thrust bearing set. The last thing that we have to do is adjust our side guides. Now in the past, you've always been told, put a dollar bill in there, use some tape, get them as close as possible. All you're doing is destroying the blade. And the reason I say
Let's not listen to that anymore then.
The reason I say that, again, if you put friction or heat anywhere in the body of the blade, it'll take the set out of those teeth, whether the teeth are between those guides or not. So now, since we're using leverage and not force, now I can actually just bring it up, leave just a little bit of daylight between the blade and the guide.
Okay, so you're just eyeing that out?
Yep. Now, if the side guides turn a little or occasionally, that's okay. Thrust bearing is way more important than those side guides. Remember, we don't care about the front edge anymore. We're using the back edge of the blade as leverage to direct where that front edge goes. Now we've got a little movement there, a little movement there. We are ready to put our table back on, get it leveled up, and let's start cutting some wood.
So we tuned it all up, Blade's in, everything's set. Only thing left to do is plug it in, put the glasses on, turn it on, see if it works.
Let's give it a test.
Let's go. Honor's all yours. What do you think? That works?
It's as set as it could possibly be. The last thing we got to do is put that sticker on.
Let's do it. Look at that. Approved.
It is.
Thank you so much for watching People, Places, Power Tools. Alex, thanks so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
So where can people find your stuff?
Well, my brand new YouTube channel, BANDSAW Life. Come see me.
That sounds exciting. I can't wait to tune in.
I am super excited.
I'm gonna check it out. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. See you next time.